he had a choice on how he was going to respond to the rest of his life. And it's the same with you. And don't let Satan win. Honestly, what you need to do is say, let's start a compassion ministry. And what we're going to do, he has a billion stars he's in control of. He can deal with your, and God's saying, I don't want that. I want you to treat me like you would treat your best friend. Those are real feelings that we think we got to keep to ourselves, like, shh, no, God, where we can't, no, he knows. Okay, welcome. For those of you that are watching us online, Roku, apps, any way you found us, we're glad you joined us today. If you want to know more about our ministry, you can go to womensbiblestudy.com, and on there you can get all the handouts, you can watch old lessons, however you want to do that, you can find us there. So we're glad you joined us today. Now, last week, was that super fun? Yes. Okay, we had so much fun. For those of you watching online, we had our Chad Williams event. Please go back and watch that. Session 1 is now up. Session 2 and 3 will be up as soon as David's hiding, so he's not going to tell me when. Hopefully Session 2 will be up this week. Session 3 probably, watch this, probably tomorrow 2 and 3 will be up. He's back there shaking his head saying that's not happening. So it'll probably be next week. But anyway, I wanted to let you know that now. I told you that, we'll tell you what happened the nighttime event. The nighttime event we told you was so fun. I can't even tell you. The food was spectacular. The place was packed. The entire Liberty basketball team came in, the varsity team. They were in their like red sweats and jackets, and they all looked like, and they all sat over there. It was kind of fun. And Chad was so great because his heart and passion is for people to come to Christ. And so he did the same thing he did here in the morning, and then he asked people at the very end if they wanted to come to know Christ, that they would raise their hand. And lots of people raised their hand. And then he took it a step further. And he said, now I want you to realize that to be a Christian means you need to stand up for your faith. And I'm going to ask you that if you want to come to Christ and you want to devote your life to him, I want you to stand up. And I will tell you, half of that basketball team stood up, okay? And people all over the audience stood up. And it was so exciting because it was like, yes, everything that we wanted for that night was to bring kids and people to Christ. We've heard from a few people that said, I brought someone and they stood up and were so excited about what God's going to do in their life now. So it was great. So thank you to those of you. Some of you purchased tables to house these kids, and it was awesome. So thank you for that. My problem after the whole event was over, I'm wearing green today, by the way, because it's Christmas in 2 weeks, see? So you always know it's Christmas and Thanksgiving. I wear rust or whatever color that weird thing is on Thanksgiving and green on Christmas. I'm not sure what I'm going to wear next week. I'll have to wear red maybe. Okay. I have no idea why I just told you that. Anyway, Chad, back to Chad. Okay, so my problem is once we get all these kids here and everyone stands up and it's like, yay, they come to Jesus. Now I wake up the next morning and say, all right, now how are we going to get them trained? We got to train these kids up. And so I was stressed for the next couple days. And I'm like, we need to bring Chad back in. And we need to train all these kids. So I had all of this stuff. And so I pour it all out to Rob. And he just laughs at me. He's like, honey, I kind of think Chad probably has his own ministry. Like, he's fine, okay? But then God really impressed upon me something. That it was a thought that, it was something that happened 30 years ago. And God reminded me of this. When our oldest kids were about 8, we lived next to a family that were very, very, very Catholic, and so very strong in their beliefs. So we asked him one time if their son could go to vacation Bible school. And so she let him. And at the very end of the week, she came up, he got out of the car, he went running to his mom, and he said, Mom, I asked Jesus in my heart. And she just looked at him and she just said, oh, you've already done that through the Catholic Church or whatever they do. And I never thought anything about it. Last year, we went to it was this benefit thing, not a benefit thing. It was I can't think, a hospital put it on. We went out there with Sherilyn and Bob because they were doing the food for it. And what it was is taking paraplegics and quadriplegics and taking them out to the lake. And they had these special apparatuses to put them in so that they could ski. And it gave them this skiing opportunity. It was so incredible. And so it was serving food and doing all that. Well, we got into a boat because they wanted to show us how they did it. So we went out there, and as we're driving out there, this guy is sitting there. And he looks at me and he said, you don't remember me, do you? And I'm like, you look kind of familiar, but not really. And he said, I was your next door neighbor, the 8-year-old little boy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you doing? I looked down at his arm. He has his whole arm tattooed with Jesus and the Last Supper and a big verse written across it. And I said, what happened to you? And he says, I'm a follower of Christ. And I thought, I didn't have to do anything. Like, I didn't have to train him back when he was 8, because when a person comes to Christ full-heartedly, like hopefully those kids did and whoever else is in the room, God promises this in Philippians 1:6, that he who began a good work in you, he's going to complete it. Okay, that's his job to do that. And we can only do so much here. In Hebrews, it talks about Jesus being the author of our faith and the finisher of our faith. And so when I realized that, I said, you know what, God, I'm just going to trust all of these kids and all of these adults that came to know you during that, because I know that you're going to bring along the right place for them. So that just kind of made me feel just a tad bit better. Now, I decided that I could never be a Navy SEAL. And this is why, okay? Chad was always, every time he would talk, it was so cute, he'd be like, people would say, well, did you ever want to quit? He'd be like, I would die before I ever quit, okay? So my thinking is I'm going to do that with the peanut M&Ms in the freezer. So I thought, well, I'm going to get home, and it's going to be like, I'm going to die before I go to that freezer and get a peanut M&M. That lasted about 2 hours. So I don't have the discipline to be a SEAL, apparently. Dusty was so cute. He's our 16-year-old. He comes in the next day and he goes, I go, Dusty, did you like the event? And he said, yeah. He goes, I realized I couldn't be a Navy SEAL. I forgot my backpack in my car. I ran out. It's like 50 degrees here at nighttime. Okay, there's a little puddle of water like this big. He goes, I stepped in and I was like, I'm freezing. I'm so cold. I have to get back in the house. And I'm like, he goes, I don't think I'd ever make it through SEAL training. Yep, I don't think so either. Okay, we are going to talk about Bible, sort of, okay? But I have 2 things I want to tell you first. So first I want to show you, for those of you that support our ministry, I always tell you that 10% of all the donations that go into our thing, or whoever sends in money, 10% goes to 2 different ministries. Feed My Starving Children gets 5%, and Return Hope. Return Hope is doing, they're kind of adopted a village in Africa. We've already built one well there. It was kind of super cool. And so they called us a couple months ago and they said, look, you have a certain amount of money sitting there. It's not enough to build a well, but we want to pull your money with someone else's money to build a well by a school. And here it is. It just got done. So thank you to those of you. I want you guys to know that by coming here, by putting donations in, it is really affecting people all over the world. I know I've told you this before. One of our biggest people on Facebook are from the Philippines. People can watch us from the Philippines. We hear from people from Africa all the time. So it's kind of like what we do here is kind of going out there, but it can't happen without you guys. So thank you for making all of this possible. It was kind of fun. Okay, second thing I want to talk about is Christmas. And that is because Rob and I went to see Kirk Cameron's movie. Did anyone see that? Anyone? You saw? Okay, a few people saw it. Here's my problem with Christmas. I think I'm kind of bah humbug. And I think a lot of it is because I feel like in the movie Kirk Cameron's brother-in-law, and it's kind of like, where's Jesus in Santa Claus? And where's Jesus in the snowman? And where's Jesus in whatever? And even Cheyenne would be the first to tell you, I don't really decorate like I used to. I look forward to it being over more than enjoying it. And so Rob and I went to see the movie, and it's about Kirk's sister, who loves Christmas. And so she has these parties, and she has Santa Claus there, and she has it all dressed, decorated, and her husband hates Christmas. So at the party, he goes and sits in the car, and Kirk goes in and sits down with him and said, what's going on, buddy? And he said, there is nothing in that house except a little teeny tiny nativity scene stuck in a corner somewhere that has anything to do with Jesus. And he was so frustrated, and Kirk does the greatest job explaining how you can enjoy Christmas and still love Jesus. And so he starts by explaining who Santa Claus was. And St. Nicholas was an actual man. Santa Claus is is a mythical figure based on a man who was a very devout Christian. In the 4th century, in 325, Constantine, he got all the early church leaders together at what is called the Council of Nicaea. And if you think about it, the canon of the Bible wasn't completely done yet. We'll learn that in a couple weeks when we do our Bible series. But in almost about 365 is when, they got together and decided, okay, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, these are going to be in the actual Bible. At this particular time, it was just all of these letters, Paul's letters were floating around, and no one really knew what to do with everything. And so they came together to figure out who in the world Jesus was. And who was the Holy Spirit? How does all this work together? And so it was called the Council of Nicaea. And St. Nicholas was actually there. He was an actual man, and he loved Jesus, and he loved God. And there was a man named Arius from Egypt, and he came over, and he was starting to spout off all this heresy about Jesus and what that wasn't true. And St. Nicholas actually got up and slapped him in the face. He got in a lot of trouble for that. But the point is that St. Nicholas is a man who loved God, and he came from a very wealthy family. When his parents died, they left him a big inheritance, and that's what he wanted to do. He just went, he'd throw money down chimneys of people, and he would throw money in houses. And so whenever we look at Santa Claus, we can look at Christmas and say, you know what? Santa Claus is based on a man who just loved Jesus. Okay, so we can start with Santa Claus. Then he talked about trees. He said, when you go to a tree lot and you see all these trees, he said, look at it like, how did Jesus die? He died on a cross, which was out of a tree. And he said, so whenever you look at your tree, you can think, Jesus died on the cross for me. And you can kind of put it like that. Gifts. I'm just not big. I think our kids are spoiled, and I'm like, you don't need anything else, okay? And they send me all these lists, and it's kind of cute. But I tend to be like, oh, this is ridiculous. Well, he said, who was the most extravagant giver ever? And it was Jesus, who died on the cross for us. And he said, so whenever you give gifts, give it extravagantly, remembering that Jesus did what he did for us. He said, toy soldiers, if you have those like nutcracker soldiers or whatever around the house, he said, every time you look at them, remember of the time when Jesus was born under Roman rule, where they wanted to just get rid of him. And then the other day I was walking by, and we have a lot of snowmen around our house, and it dawned on me that snowmen are like white as snow. And when I walk by a snowman, I'm like, thank you, Jesus, that you died for me, and you've made my sins white as snow. So we can take Christmas. And so I went home, and I was so excited. I decorated a lot. Cheyenne's like, you put up the city this year. I'm like, I know, I'm kind of super excited. So for those of you that were like me, they're just like bah humbug about Christmas, let's enjoy it. Let's wear green jackets all day long, every day until Christmas. How's that? So I want you guys to enjoy it. So. All right, now should we talk about life is a battle? Might be a good idea. I probably talk so much that we don't even have any lesson left, but we're going to try to get through this. Life is a battle. We are working through. We are in lesson 7, a life of Joshua. Joshua is now, when we left before Thanksgiving, they just crossed over the River Jordan. But I want to talk about today one point, but the point about life is a battle is that life is a battle, and you and I are in a battle. And I learned this from Joshua and from actually going all the way back from Moses to the Israelites. Now think about this. The Israelites were stuck in Egypt. Now they were slaves. That was a really bad, sad time in their life. And some of you are right there. You are living in a I'm stuck in Egypt state, and you just want out of there, but God's not letting you out right now, and you got to learn a lot of lessons while you're at. Some of you are like that. We're going to call those the boo stages, like boo, hoo, hoo, I don't like that. But then we're going to talk about the yay stages in life. Like Moses comes along and he's like, let my people go. By the way, that movie comes out this week. I am so excited, Exodus. I'm going to be there, okay? AMC, the very first showing, I'm going to be there. So just so you know, if anyone wants to come to movies with me, come hang out with me. Anyway, I'm excited for that. But Moses comes along and says, let my people go. And so that's a yay time in life. But do you see how life goes? Boo, yay. Okay, and then they get to the Red Sea, and it's like, boo, how are we going to get across there? And then God parts, it's like, yay. Okay, so you have all of these times in your life. They're in the wilderness. Okay, they're wandering in the wilderness, boo. No. And then God provides everything for them, quail and food and manna. And then it's like, yay. And then Moses dies. Boo. And then Joshua raises up, yay. I mean, this goes on all your life, crossing the Jordan, boo. And God makes it available so they can go through, yay. But that's life. And if we can really grasp that, oh my gosh, it's going to change everything. Now, the problem is that some of you are in yay stages of your life, and you're just like, things are just going great. And that's awesome. And some of you are in boo stages, and you're so sad. And you've lost someone, and Christmas is a really, really hard time, and I totally get that. And I just want to encourage you that life is like that. You just have days where you're up and days when you're down, and that's just life. But I want to get us to where we can go through any battle, and we can just know it's okay. And we can still love God, and we can have the peace and joy, and hopefully we can figure out how to do that today. Now, I realize this whole idea of life is a battle because I like bubble baths, so it's kind of like my favorite thing to do in life. I love hot bubble baths with lots of bubbles, and I lay in there, and I think like life is wonderful. So over Thanksgiving, we were at the cabin. My bathtub is right by a window where I can look out and see the forest, and it's kind of my favorite thing to do. So I woke up in the morning, and I said, I'm going to take a nice hot bubble bath, because it was cold up there. So I laid in the bathtub, and I heard Rob outside the door, and I said, hey, Rob, I decided what I'm doing today. And he yells in, what? And I said, I'm going to stay in the bathtub all day. And he's like, okay. And I said, no, think about this. Like, it's so lovely in here. I'm going to just lay in the bathtub, and then when the water gets cold, I'm just going to put more hot water in it. It's going to be an awesome day. And he said, that's great, except we have somewhere to be in 10 minutes, so get out, okay? But I thought that about life. Like, we have those moments where things are great, like bubble bath times. But then you got to get out. It's kind of cold. You got to put a towel around. You got to get dressed. And then you got to go out into the cold and actually face life. And life is a battle. Now, before we left for Thanksgiving, the Israelites crossed the Jordan River because God stopped the water up 19 miles upstream. And when they got done, God told them, this was our last lesson, and this is where we ended, God told them to go set up what we call memory stones. And each stone, and he did 12 stones, and every time the Israelites would walk by these stones, it would remind them of God and his power and how awesome he was. And we need that in our life. So we wrote a book. It's back over there. It's called Remind Me, Remembering God during the difficult days in your life. And so I thought about this for these last 2 weeks, because I know a lot of people have kids and you're going to be not here next week. And I don't want you to miss a lot of Joshua. So this is what I decided to do for these 2 weeks. I picked out 2 of, I think, the most important points out of our book, because a lot of people forget. A lot of people don't have time to read. A lot of people, they just listen to us and they'll never ever get the book. So I thought, I'm going to pick out 2 things that I know in my own life I need to be constantly reminded of. And I'm hoping by the end of the day, we can look at life as a battle and say, you know what? When I can get this one point in my life, I think it will change how every battle is viewed. And here's where we're going to go today. This is my one point that I want to make. Remind me, God, that it's all about you. That my life has to be all about you, because I believe that's the key to living life in this world, in the boo times and the yay times. I think if we can just know that it's not about me, that every single thing that happens in our life has to be about him. The sickness, the tragedy, the death, the kid on drugs, the whatever. God wants to use all of that because it's not about me. It's all about him. And if we can do that, I really believe that it would change our life. And that's why I think God told Joshua to set up memory stones. Because I think he's saying, look, Joshua, I want you to remind the people that I'm giving them this new land. Why? So that they can just have a new land and do whatever they want? No, because I want them to go into this land and make much of me to the surrounding nations. And that's what he does with us. It's kind of like, why are you and I a follower of Christ? So just so we can go to heaven? And the answer is no. It's so that we can now take our life and make it much about him and share our faith with other people. And that's what I loved about Chad last week. When he became a Christian, everything in his life changed. He suddenly realized, my life cannot be about me. Macho, Navy SEAL, it's all about me. No longer is it like that. He moves into a whole new phase that says, God, it is all about you. I'm going to leave the Navy SEALs because I have a ministry to use what you've given me in order to share you with other people. And I think the reason why so many people in this world are miserable, it's because they make their life all about them. Poor me, I have a sad life, nobody loves me, wah, 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 me. Now, all those things may be true, but I want us to move into another section where we're saying, you know what, it's not about me, okay? It's all about him. And he's placed you in the place that he has you, and we'll talk about it at the very end, because he wants to use you right where you're at. And sometimes that means in a drug rehab, and sometimes that means in a cancer ward, and sometimes that means in a divorce court. Sometimes it just means bad places. But God says, I want to use you, and I want you to make much of me while you're there. That's our job. And if we get that, I think that we can do anything. Now, standing in line this summer we were at a hotel, And I got to talking to a woman and was like, what do you do with your life? And she says, I'm a scientist. And so she starts telling me all the things that she does, and I am totally blown away. And I was thinking that she sees the world through telescopes and microscopes. So I put a couple pictures up here. This is how, like, she looks into a big old telescope and looks what she sees, things that you and I don't see. Like, we just see a star and a moon and whatever. She sees the intricacies of the galaxy, for crying out loud. Look at the next one. It's like planets and stars, and like, she gets to see that kind of stuff, okay? And then she looks into a microscope, and this is what she gets to see. I don't know what those are. Chromosomes or something, I don't know. They're so little, I wouldn't even have a clue. What's the next one? Okay, I don't even know what that means, okay? But she does, okay? She that just makes sense to her. But I'm thinking, here's a scientist who sees the world in the most magnificent ways, and so I asked her, because I'm kind of shy, I said, what do I ask her? Do you believe in God? Okay, and here's what she said. Nope, not really. I was like, what? How do you know? I got that, but here's what it showed me. The pride of people that think it's all about me. I'm so smart. I'm so brilliant. I'm so talented. I. And so we're going to learn today how God hates that. He doesn't want us to be about me. He wants us to be about him. Now, pride is something really bad because it makes much of me. And God says, when you don't have pride, you're much about him. And so that's where I want to go today. Because when we believe we're good enough or bright enough or smart enough or everything that we accomplish in our life is something that we did, God doesn't take very kindly to that. And we're going to see that today. Now, Stephen Curtis Chapman wrote a song. And here's this beautiful picture of a sunrise. And look at the words to the song. It's called Much of You. He says, how could I stand here and watch the sun rise? Follow the mountains when they touch the sky. Ponder the vastness and the depths of the sea. And think for a moment, the point of it all was to make much of me. Look at these beautiful pictures. Aww. But look at that. God just makes these beautiful sunrises and sunsets for us. And then he goes on to say in his song, he says, this is your love, O God, not to make much of me, but to send your own son so that we could make much of you for all eternity. And see, there's the challenge, regardless of who we are, because here's the problem. If you're here and you're like a doctor, let's just say, and you went to med school, and there's a lot of people that pride themselves into, I graduated from med school. I am so smart. I'm just kind of all that, okay? There's the business owner that sells his business for, I don't know, $1 billion, whatever. We were in a meeting yesterday and someone said, I don't know, one of the big companies around here just sold for like $2 billion or something. I'm just like, who does that? But people like that start beginning to think like, I'm kind of awesome. Like, I'm pretty smart and I've made good business decisions and that's just me. The author who receives this, great publishing contract because they think you're the best author around. They're like, you know what? I do write kind of great. I mean, that's just kind of me. Let's say the singer who gets, a recording contract label, and they're like, you know what? I do have a really great voice. I mean, this goes on and on, but you can kind of see how easy pride just goes on. Now, Andy Stanley is doing a series right now called Killin' It, and it's all about pride. So I was listening to it on Thanksgiving, and this is why my husband is the wisest man in the entire world, okay? So Andy Stanley says, you need to ask somebody like, where is it that your pride comes out? So I go running down to the kitchen, Rob's down there, he's doing something at the sink, and I said, Rob, I just listened to Andy Stanley. And I said, he said to ask the closest person where I have pride. And Rob just never even looked up. He's like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. He goes, that's just so between you and God. I'm not going there. And I'm like, you are really smart. I love that. But here's the thing, is that pride takes away all the glory and honor that belongs to God. Because he's the one who gives us talent, and he's the one who gives us wisdom, and all the things. Everything has to go back to God. And that's why all those scenarios about the med student is one of those things like, God, thank you for giving me the intelligence that you have. God, thank you for giving me the business savvy to be able to do this. God, thank you for giving me this talent to sing or to write or to do whatever. God, thank you that you gave that to me. Pride says, I did it on my own. Now, here was a really good example. I know I asked this before. Anyone watch The Voice in here? Just a couple people. Do you watch it? No? Yeah? Okay. Were you afraid to embarrassed to ask? No, it's not an embarrassing question. Go ahead, raise his hand. No, I'm just kidding. I don't normally watch it, but Rob got into it this year. I always tell him it's ruining my 2 favorite shows on Monday night, but whatever. I'll get over it. But anyway, there's a guy on there that when he first came on, he's a country western singer. What's his name? Craig Wayne Boyd. And it was so interesting because every time he would get up and sing, you never felt like it was about him. For some weird reason, I kept thinking, I think he's a Christian, but I don't really know why I think that. And so it went on, and it was so cool because one of the judges nixed him, and then another judge picked him up, and then another judge nixed him, and then finally he ends up with Blake Shelton, who is like a really great country singer. And this guy's a country guy. And so now they're down to the top 5. And so they go to their hometowns, and I was sickened, actually. It made me think of just idolatry, idol worship. Like, everyone's like, oh, sign my shirt or whatever. Here's my bra. That's where, I don't know what they do. But it was just so weird to me. And it was like, it's all about this singer. And so it just stressed me out. And then Craig gets up and sings. And guess what he sings? The Old Rugged Cross. Now, he hasn't won yet. Okay, there's 5 singers, and that's a big, and at the very end of it, he's so passionate about it, and I'm like, I know this guy's a Christian. And Pharrell Williams, he's a whole nother story, but as he's sitting there talking, he says to Craig, he said, Craig, it must feel so wonderful to just say, to you, God, be the glory. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of awesome. So the next day I went on and I figured out about Craig's life, and he did. He went to a Christian school. He was in a Christian band. He thought he was going to be a pastor at one point in his life. But everything, and you could tell the difference between all the people that wanted, I just want you to adore me. And he's just like, I just want you to adore Jesus. And that's the difference of what we're talking about. And it was kind of cool. So today we're going to talk about a man by the name of Nebuchadnezzar. And I've talked so much, I don't even know what time it is. Is it time to go yet? Oh my gosh. Okay, we're going to talk about Nebuchadnezzar because he's like our poster child for pride. Now, at this particular time that Nebuchadnezzar comes on the scene, our wonderful Israelites that have now crossed the Jordan that are going into the promised land, what happens to them is they eventually will walk away from God. They've decided they don't really want to follow his rules. They want to go and become idolatrous with the nations, the surrounding nations. They have Solomon's temple sitting right there. They're like, yeah, I don't really want to believe in God anymore. And they become very, very, very wayward. And so because of their disobedience, God allows a king by the name of Nebuchadnezzar to come in and basically capture the Israelites and move them and take them away to another country. In the process, they burn Solomon's temple to the ground. Nebuchadnezzar comes in and takes all the gold and all of the silver, takes it back to Babylon, and all of the Israelites, the Jewish people at that particular time, became slaves in Babylon. Now, here's the problem, is that Nebuchadnezzar thought he was that great. He thought, look at me. I am this military genius, and I am so bright and brilliant, and look at everything that I've done. But the true story is that Nebuchadnezzar was a pawn in the hand of God. And that's what we need to really realize, is that none of us are that great, okay? God just wants to use us all in different areas in our life, and he'll use anyone to do whatever he needs to do to get a nation, a country, a family, whatever, to the place that he needs them to be. Nebuchadnezzar did not conquer Jerusalem because he was smart. He conquered Jerusalem because God gave him the ability to do it, because God needed that to happen to discipline the wayward Israelites. God will do whatever he needs to do to get whatever job done. Now, I want to show you what happens when somebody makes much of me. As Nebuchadnezzar stood on this rooftop, look what he says in Daniel 4:28. But all these things did happen to King Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months later, he was taking a walk on the first floor of the royal palace in Babylon. As he looked across the city, he said, "Look at this great city of Babylon. By my own mighty power, I have built this beautiful city as my royal residence to display my majestic splendor." Ouch! Okay? Bible-history.com gave us this little picture here of what Babylon looked like. For those of you that don't know this, Babylon is modern-day Iraq. It is actually, we're going to find out where Saddam Hussein has his summer palace. I'll show you a picture of that. But because of documentation and inscriptions, what we realize is that Babylon was a hugely wealthy, successful town at this particular time. I wrote in your handout some interesting facts according to this historian Herodotus about Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, and this is what it says. In the form of a square, Babylon was built 14 miles on each side. This is a huge magnitude area. The brick wall was 56 miles long, 300 feet high, 25 feet thick, and another wall 75 feet behind the first wall, and it extended 35 feet below ground. There was 250 towers that were 450 feet high. A wide and deep moat encircled the city. The Euphrates River flowed through the middle of the city. Ferry boats and a half-mile-long bridge with drawbridge closed at night. The Hanging Gardens, one of the wonders of the ancient world, and water was raised from the river by hydraulic pumps. 8 massive gates that led to the inner city and 100 brass gates. Streets were paved with stone slabs 3 feet square. Golden image of Baal and the golden table, both weighing over 50,000 pounds of solid gold. 2 golden lions, 1 solid gold human figure, 18 feet high. That was Nebuchadnezzar's palace, and that was his town. And he looked out over this big, the towers and the gold and the statues, and he said, I am so awesome. And he was kind of pretty proud of himself. Now, I want to show you that these are real places in the Bible. This is a picture right here. If you can see this Humvee at the very bottom, that Humvee is right in front of Saddam Hussein's summer palace. Beyond that are all the ruins of Babylon, of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. At the end of the Persian War, Saddam decided that he wanted to build his big palace over all of the ruins right there, all the Babylonian ruins from the time of Nebuchadnezzar. He wanted to call it Saddam's Hill right there. You can see that's his big palace. It was built to where he was wanting to cover the whole ruins because he thought that much of himself. Like he wanted to be the next Nebuchadnezzar. He actually had pictures of Nebuchadnezzar and himself at the entrance of the ruins. And he imported thousands of Sudanese laborers, because the Iraqis were all tied up in the Iraq-Iran war, to build this place right over top of all of the artifacts. Now, following the 2003 invasion, the U.S. set up Camp Alpha right over the ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. Areas were leveled to create landing pads for helicopters. Polish troops dug trenches. They took all the artifacts of the dirt and they stuck it into sandbags. It was a bad deal. People came in and looted it, no matter how much of the presence of the military were there. 10,000 historic sites were destroyed because of that war. And after the looting and the dreams of Saddam and the heavy war that went in there, all the ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon are pretty much almost gone, which is kind of super sad. But at least you can kind of see the actual area and the actual place, because I want you to know that when we study the Bible, these are real places with real time frames that Nebuchadnezzar really did stand up and look out over a city and say, I am kind of awesome, okay? And so Babylon at that time was very ego-driven. It was all about me. So when Daniel 4:30, let's read that again. As he looked across the city, he said, look at this great city of Babylon. By my own mighty power, I've built this beautiful city as my royal residence to display my majestic splendor. And then he couldn't even get another word out before, look what God says to him. Daniel 4:31. While these words were still in his mouth, a voice called down from heaven, O King Nebuchadnezzar, this message is for you. You are no longer ruler of this kingdom. You will be driven from human society. You will live in the fields with the wild animals, and you will eat grass like a cow. 7 periods of time, 7 years, will pass while you live this way. Until what? Until you learn that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of the world and gives them to anyone he chooses. In other words, Nebuchadnezzar, anyone that's listening, it's not about us. It's all about God and what he wants to do with our life. And somehow that was so comforting to me. That means wherever you are, if you're a follower of Christ in your life, wherever you are, God has never taken his eyes off of you. He is in control of every single thing that goes on in your life and in your world. God made really good on his word. Look at verse 33. That same hour, the judgment was fulfilled, and Nebuchadnezzar was driven from human society. He ate grass like a cow. He was drenched with the dew of heaven. He lived this way until his hair was as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like bird claws. Now, think about that. Hi, I work for King Neb, okay? And they're like, hey, can we have a meeting with another country? No, he's kind of busy. Well, how come? It's been like 2 years. We haven't seen him. 7 years. No one sees him because he's insane. He's a crazy man, looking like a bird and claws and crazy man. And the truth of the reason why he was like that was because he took glory that belonged to God and took it upon himself. And God says that is absolutely unacceptable. And it should be a clear warning to us not to do that. A proud young man was walking into a room, and he was looking for his friend, and he passed by these 2 really cute blonde girls, and as he walked by, they both said 9. And he was kind of proud of himself, and he thought, this is kind of cool. Those girls think I'm a 9. So he walked to his friend, and he said, hey, those cute blondes over there, they think I'm a 9. And they said, no, those girls are German, and they don't even speak English. And 9 in German means no, okay? So God has a really great way of humbling us. So just know that going into this. And he wants us to recognize that everything that we have in our life comes from him. Now, for Nebuchadnezzar, look what he finally realizes this in verse 34. After this time had passed, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven. My sanity returned, and I praised and worshiped the Most High and honored the one who lives forever. His rule is everlasting, and his kingdom is eternal. All the people of the earth are nothing compared to him. He does as he pleases among the angels of heaven and among the people of the earth. No one can stop him or say to him, what do you mean by doing these things? Stop there for just 1 second. It just popped into my brain. Some of us are there, and we're saying, God, why are you letting this happen to me right now? Why did my boyfriend break up with me? Why did I get cancer? Why did someone I love die? Why? And I think the time in our life when our life changes is when we come under the authority and the sovereignty of God, and we say, God, my life is yours. You can do whatever you want with me because I know that you are ruler of everything. He goes on and says, when my sanity returned to me, so did my honor and glory and kingdom, and my advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored as head of my kingdom with even greater honor than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and glorify and honor the King of heaven. All his acts are just and true, and he is able to humble the proud. And always remember that God is able to humble us, but unfortunately, pride can happen to all of us. The med student knows how much time he or she has spent in the books trying to make it through these tests. That the singer knows the amount of voice lessons that they've taken. That the man who sells his company knows the amount of stress he's put in over his life, devoting his time to this company. But the problem is that we become prideful because of those things. And God says that is absolutely unacceptable. And what do we need to do if that's us? And here's what Nebuchadnezzar did. He looked up. He looked up. And finally, he stopped looking within. He stopped looking and saying, I'm kind of awesome. And he looked up and he said, God, you are so awesome. Thank you for everything that you have given me. I was thinking about that last night. I was going over this lesson, and I'm sitting there in a chair, and I have my door open, and we have this like fountain on so I can hear water. And my dogs are laying there with me, and it was just nice and cool. And I just said, God, I deserve none of this. Like, I honestly deserve none of this. And I realized that that's what God wants from all of us, is the point of saying, God, I don't deserve any of this. And what time is it? Oh, I think that's what Nebuchadnezzar teaches us, is that it's not about us. It's all about God. And when we make it about him, we don't think we deserve it. Like, I think there's this thing in the United States that says, I deserve more. I deserve a better job. I deserve that person to love me. I deserve to not be sick. I deserve. And somehow it all becomes about us. And when we change and make it all about God, I think, honestly, that's when all of our lives change. I just do. I just think we can go through any battle in our life when we know that it's all about Him. There's another place in the scripture that talks about a man by the name of, who are we talking about now? Uzziah. He's 16 years old in 2 Chronicles. I kind of paraphrased this a little bit. 2 Chronicles, look at what happens to the 16-year-old. All the people of Judah had crowned Amaziah's 16-year-old son Uzziah as king in place of his father. After his father's death, Uzziah rebuilt the town of Elath, restored it to Judah. Uzziah was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. Now look at this. He did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his father Amaziah had done. Uzziah sought God during the days of Zechariah, who taught him to fear God, and as long as the king sought guidance from the Lord, God gave him success. And that's great news. It's like Uzziah just trusted God and sought, God, I just want to do what you want to do, and I thank you for giving me all that you've given me. But look what happens in 2 Chronicles 26. Uzziah declared war on the Philistines, broke down the walls of Gath. He built new towers. God helped him in his wars against the Philistines. His fame spread even to Egypt, for he had become very powerful. Uzziah built fortified towers in Jerusalem. He constructed forts in the wilderness, dug many water cisterns because he kept the greatest herds of livestock. He loved the soil. He had many workers, had his army of well-trained warriors. The army consisted of 307,500 men, all elite troops. Uzziah provided the entire army with shields, spears, helmets, costs of mail, bows, and sling stones. He built structures on the walls of Jerusalem, designed by experts to protect those who shot arrows and hurled large stones from the towers of the corners of the wall. In other words, everything about Uzziah he did because God blessed him. But look what happens in 15. His fame spread far and wide, for the Lord gave him marvelous help, and he became very powerful. But, I hate that, when he had become powerful, he also became proud, which led to his downfall. He sinned against the Lord his God by entering the sanctuary of the Lord's temple and personally burning incense on the altar. Azariah, the high priest, went in after him with 80 other priests of the Lord, all brave men. They confronted King Uzziah and said, "It is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. That is the work of the priests alone, the descendants of Aaron, who are set apart for this work. Get out of the sanctuary, for you have sinned. The Lord God will not honor you for this." Uzziah, who was holding an incense burner, became furious. But as he was standing there raging at the priests before the incense altar in the Lord's temple, leprosy suddenly broke out on his forehead. When Azariah, the high priest, and all the other priests saw the leprosy, they pushed him out, rushed him out. The king himself was eager to get out because the Lord had struck him. So King Uzziah had leprosy until the day he died. He lived in isolation in a separate house, for he was excluded from the temple of the Lord, and his son Jotham was put in charge. Because here's the deal. These are two tragic stories about how God says, I will not let you take the honor and glory that goes to me and put it upon yourself. Those are kind of scary things, like leprosy and We need an attitude in our life of like a man by the name of Canute. In 1014, he was a king. He was a very, very powerful king, and he was a very, very godly man. During his reign, people would come up to him and flatter him and say, "Oh, you're just such a wonderful king, and you're so awesome, and you're so everything." And he just couldn't take it. And so he had this idea, and so he told everyone to come to the ocean with him. And he set his chair down as the tide was coming in, and he said, "Tide, do not come in." Well, he's not going to stop the tide. But all the people were waiting for the tide to stop because they had built him up so much. And the tide came up, and finally it got him and went around his chair. And he took his crown, and he got up, and he went to a church. And there was a statue of Jesus that had been crucified. And he took his crown, and he put it on Jesus. Because he realized one thing, and he wanted everyone to know that. I am nothing without God. Nothing. It's all about him. Now, I want to just quickly, before we go, talk to some of you, and you can insert a couple different words into this passage. Some people here are in ministry, and I want to tell you what's changed our ministry because, and it was this verse, because some of you have your own ministry, but you could use this verse in anything, a relationship, a job, and I want you to see what changed our life when we read this. 2 Corinthians 4:1 says this, "Therefore, since we do hold and engage in this ministry by the mercy of God." Okay, now I want you to just stop there for a second. Put whatever you want. "Therefore, since we hold and engage into this relationship, into this job, into this career, whatever God, we engage in it by the mercy of God." And this is why. Because God is the one who is granting us favor, granting us benefits, granting us opportunities, and granting salvation. And we do not get discouraged. Why? Because it's all about Him, okay? Everything we have is about Him. And that's why nothing in our life should ever discourage us. Because here's the deal. When we win the battle, and if Craig wins The Voice, and if some Christian wins American Idol, and if you get the job, or get the promotion, or get the contract, guess who gets the credit? God. Okay, not you. Because God says in that verse, I'm the one granting you everything that you need. You haven't done it. I've done it for you. I look at that in here. Some days, like when this place is packed in here, I don't for 1 second think it has anything to do with me. I know it doesn't. I know God can shut this thing down tomorrow if He wants to. It has nothing to do with me. And I know that because of that verse tells me that. He's the one who grants favor. He's the one who brings people here. He's the one who does everything. But you got to take that to the opposite end too. Because when you lose the battle, and when you don't get the job, and when people don't show up here for Bible study, or maybe our Roku numbers are down for that week, we don't ever have to get discouraged. Why? Because we know it's all about Him. Our lives are His, so do whatever you want. And we never have to get discouraged if we lose our job, if we lose the boyfriend, if we lose the marriage. We don't, because it's not about us. And I think that is what we need to get in order to change our life. We have 3 minutes, and I want to end with this quick story. An Ambitions University student was talking to his wise uncle one day, and his uncle realized that his nephew had left God out of the picture in his life. So he asked his nephew, he said, "Joe," he said, "tell me what you plan to do after school, after you graduate." And he says, "Well, I'm going to start my career." He said, "Well, that sounds good. What then?" He says, "You know what, then I'm probably going to get married and have a family." And he says, "That's awesome. What then?" He says, "Well, then I'm going to make my fortune." "Great, that sounds like fun. What then?" He says, "Well, then I'm going to retire and buy a home in the country." He says, "Well, that sounds great. What then?" He says, "Well, I don't know. I suppose I'll die." And he said, "You're right. What then?" Okay? Because here's the deal. You and I live in this world. We have one shot at this life. And our job is going to be one of two things. We're either going to make much of me, or we're going to make much of Him. And I think the key to life is a battle, and anything we do is making much about Him. Because if we make it about me, we can get discouraged and despondent about anything that goes on. But when we make much of Him, nothing that happens in our life will throw us off. Because we know He loves us and He has a purpose behind what He has allowed into our life. And if you're here and you don't know Jesus at all, I'm just going to tell you, you're going to be miserable all of your life until you get to that point and say, I give. And it's really simple. It's, Jesus, come in my life. It's that simple. And change me from the inside out. Help me, God, to live for you and not live for me. Let's pray. God, thank you for your word. Thank you for these Nebuchadnezzar and Uzziah and the things that we've learned today about how you want us to give you the glory for everything in our life. God, help us never, ever to be prideful. Help us never to think it's about us. Because, God, you have given us so much, especially those of us that live in America. We have a free country, and we have food and things that we can go see and have and do, and it's all a gift from you. God, help us to recognize that, and every single thing we do, give you the glory and honor that is due you. For those that don't know you today, God, I pray that they walk out of here and say, God, I just want to know you. I pray that they pick up your word and you will change their life, because you promise that you who begin a good work in us will continue it until the day you come back. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Just to say, God, I'm adding you into my equation. I'm adding you into this problem. And when God had a purpose for his pit, just like he has a purpose for your pit that you're into. He's not going to let you down. When you believe the Bible and the Bible alone, I said, that's what we... Suddenly one day you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, I don't really have animosity towards that person anymore. But I promise you that I think today you'll be really, really encouraged at the very end, because I learned something I never even thought of.